Welcome to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Badass Direct Sales Mastery is a podcast for rock star direct sales moms who are determined to make their business kick ass. Jennie will share her knowledge of effective sales and recruiting techniques, tips to get what you want from your business, and will interview direct sales professionals and leaders from various companies. The interviews will give insight to how these rock stars got to where they are and where they plan to grow in the future. And now, the direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger.
Welcome back to another episode of Badass Direct Sales Mastery. My name is Jennie Bellinger. I am your direct sales dom, and I am here with a really cool guest. For those of you who maybe have been living under a rock for the last 2 or 3 years, you may not have heard of Enneagram. I know I hadn't heard of it until about maybe 18 months ago, had no idea what it was. And ever so slowly, I've been introduced to it more and more over time. And I was introduced to Elisabeth Wurm a couple months ago and finally was able to get her on the podcast to share her with you guys today, because the Enneagram is a really great way for you to begin to understand yourself and those around you in order to have more effective communications, sales, relationships. It's useful in so many different ways. So let me introduce you to Elisabeth. She is a life coach who offers Enneagram-infused coaching and group workshops for artists, leaders, and organizations. The Enneagram is a personality tool used for growth and self-awareness. She has led trainings, taught workshops, and facilitated discussions in corporate, nonprofit, and educational settings. Her experience is in theater, improv, and arts management, which led her to complete her master's thesis on the Enneagram as a tool for leadership in the arts. And what's really fun is so much of this is a major part of what we do in direct sales and network marketing. So I'm really excited to introduce you guys to Elisabeth. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Jennie. Thanks for having me.
Yay! I am so happy to introduce everybody to you because, like I said, unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably at least heard of Enneagram, but you may not know what it is, how it can be used, what it's for. And so I wanted to be able to share your knowledge, your experience with it with the audience so that they can potentially then connect with you to take their experience, their knowledge further if they've already typed themselves, or maybe they went to one of those free surveys, online, which may or may not be accurate. I don't know, because I don't know where they're going, but I think it's really important for people to have an understanding of what it is. So let's start with that. What is the Enneagram?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Enneagram is a dynamic system. So it does look at our personalities. However, it doesn't pigeonhole us into one personality. It's actually pretty ancient, the idea of there are 9 archetypes, ways of being in the world. And those 9 types date back, I've heard up to 3,000 years. There are signs of them being used in Greek literature, in Asia, Europe, the Middle East. Actually, the modern Enneagram was developed by practitioners in South America who then brought them to California in the 1970s. So it's kind of a combination of work by George Gurdjieff, who was a practitioner in Russian Armenia back in the 1940s. And then he traveled to Chile, where he met Oscar Icazo and Claudio Naranjo. And they are kind of the fathers of the modern Enneagram, where they kind of took his work of these 9 archetypes, basically. And each archetype basically says we all have a core fear and a core desire that, when combined, create a motivation for most of our behaviors. And when we take a look at what we're driven by, you can kind of predict how our behaviors are. And so there have been a lot of layers added on by different practitioners, therapists, priests, psychologists, and it really does pair really well with different cognitive psychology theories, some of Brené Brown's work. You can use it in combination with spirituality, in combination with the corporate world, in leadership. So there's really no end to what you can use it with. But when you come down to its core, the theory is that we have our ego. In psychology, we have an ego, which doesn't mean we're all arrogant pricks, but it means that we have this false personality, this personality, kind of like a coat of armor that we're wearing, and we're walking through the world. It's developed. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing either. It just is. We walk through the world with our ego. It protects us and it helps us get our needs met. It helps us make our way through the world. And the ego is formed based off of how we're kind of wired. It's also formed with some environmental factors. No one really knows if you're kind of born with things or if it's all environmental. It's kind of a combination, in my opinion, of nature versus nurture. And it is made up of our feeling center, our thinking center, our doing center. So we have in our brain, we have 3 areas that control our feelings, our thinkings, and our doings. I like to say we have like a gut instinct. We have a limbic system that controls our emotions. And then we have our prefrontal cortex that controls our thinking, where we can be aware that we're thinking about thinking, like those types of thoughts. And so the Enneagram basically says we all have a feeling center, thinking center, doing center. And we have these instincts of how we move through the world to get our needs met, to be accepted by society, to gain love or acceptance or approval or safety. What happens is we get off balance. There is some sort of childhood wound that we perceive. It doesn't mean that someone directly abused us, or it doesn't mean that we were neglected as kids. It just means that we kind of focus on certain things and we miss other things. And so the things that we've missed end up creating this wound, this gap. It could be that your needs won't be taken care of, that you have to fend for yourself. Or it could be your needs aren't important. You need to focus on everyone else's needs in order to survive. It could be you have to perform in order to be accepted because your true self is not enough. Little things like that, I doubt that someone said to you when you're 3 years old, but things that we've just kind of gleaned as children. And so somewhere in there, one of our centers, feeling, thinking, or doing, got wounded. And we started operating through life with 2 of the centers working overtime, and the 3rd center kind of hanging back. And for a while, that works for us. We make our way through the world, and we kind of find, if I do X, Y, Z, then that equals love. Or if I do X, Y, Z, that equals safety. What is hard, though, is when that stops working for us. And we find ourselves in the same place again, experiencing another failure, experiencing another rejection, experiencing another betrayal, experiencing another disconnection. And we're wondering, what the hell went wrong? Why do I keep finding myself in this same habitual cyclical pattern? And so what the Enneagram does is it actually shows you, hey, it doesn't tell you that you're in a box. It says, hey, actually, here's the box you've been living in, and you can step out of it if you want to. So here's kind of the lie you've been believing. Here's the fear that's been driving you. Here's the center that you're not using. If you are interested, you can keep going. If this works for you, you keep going. But if you're interested, you can start to explore other lenses of being in the world. What do the other 8 types have to do? How do they make their way in the world? The fear that I believe, is it always true? Sometimes it is confirmed and we believe that is true, but is it always true? Maybe there's some exceptions to the rules. Maybe leaning into vulnerability, taking a chance, taking a risk on a relationship, on a job, on an idea. Maybe that's out of our comfort zone, but it could lead to more joy or connection or belonging. Brené Brown talks about vulnerability. Our ego hates vulnerability. Our ego's job is wired to protect us from ever being vulnerable. But as Brené Brown talks about, we cannot experience true intimacy or connection without vulnerability. Think about like a romantic relationship, for instance. You have to take a risk somewhere in there if you're ever going to experience true knowing, belonging, intimacy. Your ego is going to be like, don't share that story. Don't show that part of yourself. You won't be loved or you won't be accepted. They'll leave you, and that's the ego saying that to try to protect you. But when we can discern, we have a choice. When we can discern that we have a choice and we can decide, okay, I'm going to take a risk here, or maybe this is not the time to take a risk. We then take control back of our lives. We have some autonomy. Rather than just allowing ego to be in the driver's seat of our car. And the ego is like, nope, we're not getting off on that exit. That says romantic relationship, and I'm not getting off there. We switch sides with the ego and we sit in the driver's seat and we thank the ego for its warnings. But then we have the decision. We can discern if it's something that we want to embark on, or if we want to pass through. So,
amen to that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, seriously, I don't mean to interrupt. And at the same time I do, because I think that's a really powerful thing for people to pull out from this, is to understand that so many of us are really, truly being driven by our fears.
Yes.
Right. And really think of it in those terms, driven, like literally fear is in the driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you want confirmation of this, if you want to read about that, guys, I've not read any of Brené's stuff, but one of my favorite books that really addresses this and some of how to get around it is a book by Mark Manson called Everything is Fucked, where he talks about, fear and feelings really being in the driver's seat and primarily, yes, it really is fear most of the time. So if you are tired of being driven in your life by fear, which is stressful, it doesn't feel good once you realize that that's what's going on. Utilizing this information, this Enneagram typing to begin to understand parts of yourself to be able to then overcome and more easily step over and around these fears. And like, as you said, I love how you said it, thank them for the warnings and acknowledge that the warnings are there, but realize it's not courage if there isn't a little bit of fear involved.
Yeah, that's true.
To take that step forward. So in doing the Enneagram, how did you get started? How did you become familiar with it, and what really drew you to want to help others with this?
Yeah. So I have been a Myers-Briggs fan. That was my first love. I discovered Myers-Briggs when I went through a breakup in college, and I realized, I was a super extroverted person. He was a super introverted person. And it's not that, introverts and extroverts can't be together, but we had a lot of compatibility issues. And we realized that we were not going to be going the same way in life. And so we parted amicably, but it was still a really sad time. And I was just so amazed. My mom actually explained the difference between how people get their energy and, extroverts being recharged by being around people and introverts being recharged by alone time and being able to think their own thoughts. And that idea alone struck me, that not everyone is the same, that everyone could have a different way of being in the world, and it doesn't make them wrong or rude or bad, but they're just different. They have different needs. And I had been pulling teeth, this poor introverted man, trying to get him, to hang out with me more. And I was just draining him. But then when he would disappear for a week, I felt so unwanted, which, learning my Enneagram type later, I was like, wow, that was a major trigger for me. Just feeling unwanted is a really, really scary feeling for me.
Yeah.
So that's how I found Myers-Briggs. And then I found the Enneagram through reading about more personality theories and things like that. When I started actually using the Enneagram, because I think I found out my type quite a few years ago, but I didn't do anything with it. When I got a new job, a few years back, and I had a boss who I felt like we were just disconnected. And no matter what I did, no matter how helpful I was, no matter how cheery I was, no matter how supportive I was, like I felt this disconnect that either she didn't like me or she didn't trust me or something was off and I could not pinpoint it. And I've worked in so many different industries and I've held a lot of different positions, and I'm a pretty outgoing, adaptable person. And I couldn't break through. I was like, why can't we work in a good way, together? This is so weird for me. And so I turned to the Enneagram. I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can figure out her type. Now, we're not supposed to type other people, because here's what's different about the Enneagram versus Myers-Briggs, because Myers-Briggs takes into consideration your behavior. How do you process information? How do you make decisions? Things like that. The Enneagram actually considers your motivation. So why do you process things the way you process them? And that gets down to your fear, your desires, your wounds, your feelings, things like that. And so, however, when people are living in a pretty average to unhealthy space, our behaviors can look pretty predictable, because we're not living in a self-aware, growth-oriented space. So I was reading through, my first Enneagram book was Richard Rohr's book on the Enneagram. And I was reading through, and when I read a chapter and I found my boss in the pages of this book. And I was just reading, and it was so astonishing to me, because I never, ever considered that someone could walk through the world with the fears that she had, with the desires that she had, with the priorities. Seeing the world through her eyes gave me so much more empathy and compassion, a little more patience. And I just realized, I was like, oh, these are the things that are important to her. And obviously, like, if this is what's important, you're going to spend your time focusing on that and missing other things, which I'm doing the same thing. I read the chapter on my type, and it talked about how my type uses helpfulness to try to ingratiate themselves and get support and be liked. And they just want to be liked by people. And I literally was trying to use the Enneagram to be liked by my boss, which was so stereotypical of me, because I was so afraid of being rejected. I was afraid of, if she didn't like me, then we wouldn't be able to work together in a symbiotic, harmonic way. And therefore my needs wouldn't be met. I would lose my job. I would be penniless on the street. I mean, you can just go with all the things that can go wrong there, just that anxiety. So what I ended up realizing, because with the Enneagram, the most important work you can do is for yourself, on yourself. You can't change other people. The Enneagram is great for having empathy and compassion on other ways of being in the world, for looking through somebody else's glasses to see what color the world looks like through their eyes. However, I can't change how I'm wired, but I can change what I do with how I'm wired. So the work that I ended up doing was not trying to change her, but was actually trying to become a healthier version of myself, so that I had room for other ways of doing things that were not my way. And doing that work really did, I think, it broadened our connection. Eventually I gained her trust. We never became best friends or anything like that. But, the time that we did spend working together, we found a way to work together and create good work together. And that was really helpful. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found the Enneagram. I think I would have just been really stressed and anxious every single day at work.
Oh, I can definitely imagine. So out of all that, what I think are some of the big takeaways here? First of all, don't type other people, right? Because you don't know what their motivations are, what their wounds are. Because if they're wounds, you probably don't know them unless you were already close enough for them to have shared those with you.
Yes.
So really walking away knowing, when it comes to Enneagram, just typing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This is about you. And the third thing to come out of this is you can utilize this as a way to not necessarily change who you are, but begin to change some of the ways that you react to things, because you begin to understand where some of those reactions were coming from, whether it was from a place of fear or worry or those as you said, those rose-colored glasses or black-colored glasses or brown-colored glasses or whatever color your glasses might be, that you're seeing things from a different filter based on your own past history and what certain action sequences meant for you historically, right? So beginning to understand that you can make some shifts yourself. So this isn't about changing other people. Knowing the Enneagram is knowing how to be better about you moving through the world in a way that that then will create better ways of communicating, it sounds like, with other people.
Yes. Can I give you a quick example of one way that
please.
played out?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one thing this boss used to do is she just asked me a lot of questions, and I would be assigned a project. I'd work on the project. I'd bring the project to her, and she would just have all these questions for me. And how I used to interpret that was she didn't trust me. She didn't trust me to do my work. She wanted to hear every single thought that I had going into this. And then she would bring, 10 other ways of doing things like I hadn't thought about them before. However, I knew that she's really thorough. And so I made sure to really vet the work that I did before I would bring her the final product. So I really felt like I had done the research, put in the time, and here's my final product. And it's my final product for a reason. So after learning Enneagram and talking to people who lived that way, who were the same similar type, I would say, as her, and getting some insight on why did somebody ask me all these questions if they say they trust me,
right.
So I learned that inside this type's brain, their wound is that they don't think they can trust themselves. Somewhere along the way, they learned that they're not trustworthy. So they have to find security and safety through other people, processes, governments, religious systems, bosses, any kind of authority outside of them. That's what brings them some security. And those systems or people outside of them have been vetted very thoroughly to be sure that they can be trusted. And then once they're trusted, they're very loyal to those systems. So when they look at the world, they look and see potential threats or dangers on the horizon, and they are trying to protect them and their people from any potential risks that could cause harm. And so what her questions were poking holes to see what might poke through so we can create a contingency plan. Because it wasn't that my plan was bad. She just wanted to poke some holes to see how well it stood up. Not because she didn't trust me, but because she doesn't trust anything to be secure until she's poked around a little bit. And then because she has a hard time trusting herself, she might have a really good idea. And she might say, hey, I think I'm doing this idea. What do you think about that? And normally, because I'm trying to, gain her approval, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. But then she didn't like that. So what I found out was she's looking for me to play devil's advocate to her idea, because that helps her have a sounding board for why she thinks what she thinks. So she's trying to learn how to trust herself and trust her own ideas. And so if she says, I'm thinking about this idea, what do you think? And I say, I like it. However, have you thought about A, B, or C? And then she's like, oh, well, here's why A wouldn't work. Here's why B wouldn't work. Here's why C wouldn't work. And I would not take that personally, because this exercise is for her benefit more than mine. That she needs to talk through. She's a verbal processor. She needs to talk through why all the other ones wouldn't work and why her original idea actually is the best idea, because she's a very analytical thinker and she can really think it through. Now, that's not how my mind works. I don't need to go through that process to get to a decision. I have a very different process that I get to a decision. However, when I started playing devil's advocate to her, she appreciated that it seemed to her that I was taking time to really consider and think through alongside her. And that gained some trust between us. So that I would have thought of that. I like someone who's playing devil's advocate to me, I'm like, that's like, why don't you trust that I've already thought through this?
Right.
But she really needed that process to be externalized and she would always ask questions to our team. What does everyone think about this? And she wanted us to kind of like ping pong the conversation as opposed to just kind of go along with it, because she doesn't trust the idea yet herself. So just, that's like one small example and one conversation that I never would have known that is a way of being in the world, that could help provide security and support to someone. And I mean, once I learned that, I was like, oh, I can absolutely do that. And,
oh my gosh.
And it helped our relationship,
I don't know about any of the listeners right now, but I am going to jump in at this point and go, oh my gosh, there's someone in my life who I'm now realizing is very similar to this. And I'm starting to think, okay, maybe I need to try that tactic with them. Because I really do feel like, in the past, when I've tried to present things, it's been that same kind of thing. Well, have you thought about this? Well, what about this? And I felt very much the same way you did. Like, hello.
Yeah.
Of course I've thought about all of these things and,
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. But now it's like, okay, so this isn't about me. It's about the other person. And now as, this person begins to present possible alternatives for various things or their own ideas for things, it makes a lot more sense when they're asking for all of those ideas of, what could be great, what could go wrong, and that person isn't just looking for all the things that can go great with it, which tends to be my focus, right?
Yes.
And so helping them to see some of the negative things may actually begin to help them trust my visions in the future, because they now know that I'm not just, some Pollyanna in the world, only seeing the good.
Right.
Which, for those of us who are like that, it's not that we don't see the negative. We just tend to go, I'm not going to give it that much credence because, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think what's really cool about all of this Enneagram stuff then is really beginning to understand, obviously who you are, how to begin to try different things with other people around you, especially as you learn about other types in the world and how they operate and all of that. And knowing too specifically, Elisabeth, that the listeners here are in the world of direct sales and network marketing. So how can someone who's listening right now and they've got a business with doTERRA or Rodan & Fields or Pure Romance or Tupperware or Avon or, oh my gosh, we could go on forever and ever, Arbonne, Juice Plus, right? How can they begin to utilize this? How would you see someone who's running their own business with a direct sales or network marketing focus utilizing Enneagram to their advantage with their business?
Yeah. So, really any personality can be in sales, right? So we all have this false personality. As we're working on ourselves, the false personality starts to fall away a little bit. Our coat starts to fall away, and our true self, our essence, according to the Enneagram, or if you're spiritual, maybe your soul, comes forth, and you can be your truly unique self. So the work, regardless of what direct sales business you are, is you as your unique self are going to make the most authentic relationships when you're showing up as your essence or your soul, as opposed to, someone with a facade or a mask on. So I think it will behoove you to do some work on who are you at your essence. You're not your personality. You're actually much more than your personality. Your personality can help you make your way in the world for sure. But there are also some downsides to your personality. It's kind of predictable, doesn't feel as authentic or real. So, for example, one common personality trait for people who are in sales, they really like to meet goals. Success is really important to them. So if success is really important to you and you are goal-oriented, you love checking things off your checklist, I'm betting that failure is probably scary. Some people who are tend to be towards this type would say failure is not an option, and you can reframe any failure into a new success. Maybe if you for example, if your goal was to run a 5K and you were so winded, you didn't do it. You kind of halfway through, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to change my goal to be, I'm going to run 2 miles instead. And then you meet that goal. And so then you can check it off your list, and so there's kind of this reframing of failure. So I guess my question would be, what happens if you fail? And then what happens when you're sitting there in that failure, just to sit there? There are some feelings that might come up, some uncomfortable feelings. Okay, so what happens if you're feeling those feelings? And it's just kind of ask yourself, what happens if this? And then keep going with that. So what happens if that? And kind of follow that chain of fears, of emotions that maybe you don't delve into. And what I've found with that is that actually facing my fear is not the end. It sucks, but it's not the end.
Right.
Life continues beyond failure. Life continues beyond rejection, beyond not being competent, not being perfect. Life continues for people who are flawed. And you can still find, you are still, as Brene would say, you are still worthy of love, belonging, and connection, even if you are failing at something. So what I have started to learn is to separate my identity from my behavior. So if you're someone who you really identify with being goal-oriented and you thrive off of creating checklists and you are great at being able to take a big, huge goal and break it into little chunks and then achieve those little goals. And you probably kick ass doing that and building your business. But deep down inside, if you don't meet those goals, if you were to show up as your true self, sometimes people will wonder, will anybody actually want me? Will anybody actually love me? Am I really, truly worthy of love and connection and belonging, even if I don't do? Am I still worthy of those things beyond what I do? Because what I've learned is we are human beings, we're not human doings. And so, I have a chronic illness. For example, I have Crohn's disease, and there are a lot of days where I am very sick and I cannot do the things on my checklist. And I don't feel like I'm contributing to society. I don't feel I'm doing my part. And I am just existing and I feel so worthless. And there's a shame. There's this feeling not good enough. That's what shame is. Shame is the, hey, you're not good enough, or you're too much, or who do you think you are? That's the shame voice. So when the shame voice comes up and it's like, hey, you're not contributing, like, why are you even here in this world, right? Then it's a question of self-worth. When we can build our platform of self-worth, when we can realize we are worthy of love because we exist and because we're human and not because of what we do. What we do is important, but it's not the end all be all. And if we stop doing those things, the world keeps going and we are still worthy. And so when you can get down to that root, you will not depend so much on meeting your goals. Goals are still important. You still need them, but your self-worth does not depend on it. So when you don't make that sale or you don't make that goal, you don't get one more person to sign up for that class, your identity is still safe. The behaviors, the actions can change and fluctuate, but your identity, your self-worth is still safe. So you're eliminating some of that fear, some of that uncertainty. You're eliminating a lot of pressure on yourself.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
To be able to exist and say, you know what, like, yes, I have these sales goals that I want to have, these products I'm really passionate about. I want to grow my team, to this size, but you know what, even if it doesn't happen, it will be okay. I will be provided for. It doesn't all depend on me. Even if it does, even if you're a single income household, and it does feel like it all depends on you, there's still community. We live in community. We depend on each other. I believe we were created to be independent. Unfortunately, I wish we could all be independent truly, but unfortunately, and fortunately, we are dependent beings, interdependent, where we have to rely on each other. And there's a richness that comes from building community, building trust, building intimacy and relationships with all of the 9 types, because everyone has strengths that I don't have. Everyone has weaknesses where I can come in alongside someone and let them, lend them a shoulder, lend them an arm. And so I think being aware of ourselves helps us also appreciate the other, that we don't have to be everything our own self, because that's way too much pressure. We're going to buckle under that. We're going to burn out. We're going to fail and then not be able to come back from that. It's going to be a lot of years of therapy. So, if we can take small steps of implementing rest, implementing play, implementing some of those factors that seem to take away from your productivity at work. However, Brene also teaches how rest and play actually makes you more efficient and more productive. If your self-worth's not at stake, you can take a breather. You can take a minute for some fun. You can take a minute for some rest, for some sleep. Goodness, go get some sleep. So, those are some things that, if you do some work on, hey, what are my fears? What are my goals? Where am I getting stuck in my business, right? Sometimes getting stuck shows us that it's not that we need to strive harder and harder and harder. We need to work longer hours, because actually there's kind of a cap on our productivity. When we're really tired, we're not going to book one more sale. We're just going to burn out. So, there's a book called Burnout. It talks about completing the stress cycle. And also The Body Keeps the Score talks about living with stress and trauma in your body, and how do we help our bodies process those things. When we're trying to meet our goals and build a business, sometimes that seems like it's the only thing that exists. But I'm reading a book right now called Try Softer. Because I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform, and the idea of that we are thinking beings, we are doing beings, but our bodies also need to process a lot of things. And if we're just grinding all day and all night, we're actually in the long run not the most productive. We're not going to be the most present for our loved ones. So the goal of the Enneagram is to provide balance. And so there are so many ways you can use the Enneagram, not just by learning your type. Every type has energy they take on from where they go in stress and security. You can share energies with different numbers. There are certain patterns. So for my type, I'm really bad at saying no to people. But when I'm stressed, I'm really good at saying no to people while I'm channeling some energy of a different number. That really helps me survive. I'm also tend to be more outwardly focused on other people's needs. However, sometimes I need to focus on my own needs. So I have to really channel the energy of a different number that's more inwardly focused. They're really creative and thoughtful. And when I need to take care of myself, I have to go there. So that's kind of the pattern of my number in stress and security. If you look at the Enneagram image, there's a bunch of arrows where all the numbers seem to be interconnected, because they are connected. So while we still always keep our core type, our core fears and desires that remain our same motivation, we can channel energies from other numbers, which brings the balance, which means that we can appreciate how other people are being in the world. It's not wrong, it's different, and it actually might bring some balance.
I love that. So the Enneagram, it sounds like, is, well, we don't want to type others, but by beginning to understand what our own type is, how we interact with other types, what our strengths, weaknesses are, our fears, our motivators, is really going to help someone who's in the direct sales world to, number one, begin to understand themselves and really pull from what their motivators are. So if you're sitting there wondering, why is it that I can't get motivated to do whatever? Well, if you've been pulling from the wrong motivator because you think as a direct salesperson, you should be going for the trip, or going for the car, or going for the promotion, or going for whatever, right? Whatever that may be. And you're still not doing the work. It's because you're using the wrong motivator, right? And so by understanding who you are, you can begin to understand how to motivate yourself and be more self-driven in the way that you need to be through understanding those things. And then as you learn the other types, when you begin to have conversations with your team members, for example, you can begin to understand how you can help them, and again, create a community, not just have a team of, you and your people, but now we're all a community stepping in to say, okay, Jenny's good at this. Elisabeth is good at this. Susie is good at this. So we're all going to help each other by doing what we're good at for each other and with each other. instead of saying, well, you're all on your own. And if you suck in that area, too bad for you.
Yeah. Just work harder. Just work harder,
yeah,
Jennie.
Yeah. Just do more of that thing that you suck at. Right. So I'm sure by now the listener is thinking to themselves, okay, this is great. I've heard of Enneagram. Now I have a better understanding of it. And now I want to know more about me. One of the things you've offered, and thank you so much for this generous offer, is for anyone who's a listener of the Badass Direct Sales Mastery podcast is able to go to Elisabeth's website. And we did put the link in the show notes. So all of you know, grab your phone, unless you're driving, grab your phone, open up the podcast episode, scroll to the show notes, and go to Elisabeth's website. You can go click on the rapid typing session consultation that she has open, available on her website. And then in the booking section, when you book your time with Elisabeth, make sure you use the word badass in your booking, and you are going to get $20 off of your booking fee, which normally is $45. And now you're only going to pay $25 to learn more about yourself and how you can be more effective in your business by understanding who you are, where you come from, what your fears are, how you operate under stress, where you flourish in life. She's going to be able to help you find all of this out in that typing session. So please make sure you go click on that right now. Or like I said, if you're driving, wait till you get to where you're going or pull over and do it so you don't forget. And just make sure you use the term badass in the booking comment section. So that way she knows to give you that wonderful $20 off. So
yes.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Elisabeth, for that completely super generous offer for all of the listeners of the Badass Direct Sales Mastery podcast. And I really appreciated getting to know more about the Enneagram because like I said, I first heard about it 18 months ago and I was like, okay, whatever. I'm a disc girl, right? I'm a disc girl, whatever. Yeah. And then when I had my own Enneagram typing session, that was eye-opening. Really and truly eye-opening to go, oh, that explains a lot. Oh, that explains a lot. Oh, even more like that. Because again, it's addressing different things. Every personality typing has its own place in the world and how you can utilize it. I'm now beginning to see DISC can be kind of like a sledgehammer in the world. It's maybe not a sledgehammer, a giant paintbrush. It's like a paint roller, right? You get big, broad strokes, lots of generic, general information. This Enneagram is really more about what's deep inside. And this, I think, is what's really going to make a big difference for people who work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really just the beginning to find your type, like you said. And I have other opportunities. I do some workshops. I'm working on a workshop in series for February and March.
Yay!
And then, so that will be on my website when that's posted and ready to go. And then on my website as well, you'll also see I have packages. If you're interested in going deeper, you can learn how to use the Enneagram in leadership, in the workplace, in relationships. I do couple sessions if you're interested in that. But just, okay, Jennie, I was going to ask you this. What is one takeaway that you had maybe from your typing session or something that you learned about your way of being in the world?
Ooh, okay. For me, I'd have to say it was interesting because it did help me begin to identify how I interact with others and why I do it in the way that I do it. Because I really can come in, surprise, surprise, no one who's been listening for any amount of time or anybody who knows me on a personal level. I come in big, bold, hello, this is who I am. I will, if there's no one else in the room who's taking charge, I will be the person leading that room, whatever it is, whatever's going on. To me, beginning to understand all of that was a big help to know, okay, so maybe taking a back seat every once in a while is going to be handy to let others step up and shine and all of those things. But really, it's just been eye-opening to get those underlying things, like where that came from, because, I just didn't get those things.
Well, and that's a lot of pressure too. I mean, I'm sure it sounds like you really enjoy showing up and taking charge and being a leader. But, there are some times where, even leaders get exhausted and it would be nice if someone else, would step up. And so, it's a lot of pressure when you feel like, well, I'm the one who has to do it, but you don't have to. You're probably the first to jump up, but there might be somebody else in the room who enjoys leading, but they're not going to be the first to jump up, but they'll do it and they will do it in a good way. And then you can get a break.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me tell you, hearing that, and certainly during my typing session, that did come up. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I think one of the things that would probably surprise some of the listeners. So get ready, guys. You're about to learn something about your direct sales dom. I'm a direct sales dom in business. When I'm at home in my own personal life, I am way more submissive because I'm done making decisions at the end of the day. Like I'm decision maker as mom. I'm decision maker in my business. I'm a decision maker in a lot of the networking stuff that I do, the groups that I'm a part of. And so by the time I get to the end of the day, I'm done. And I will relinquish control to a leader who has shown themselves to be worthy of that.
Right.
But that's the key. They, right. And it's taken me.
They have to have your respect.
Yeah. It's taken me 40 plus years to find someone who is ready and willing to take over in that. So now I've got time when I can completely lay back. So, it's, direct. I had this conversation with one of my clients who's in pure romance. So you guys get to hear a little bit more about me. Direct sales dom in the streets, sub in the sheets. And I think that's an important thing to understand about myself. And for people, it's okay for people to know that about me. It's like, oh my God, people might know that I'm a little bit submissive. Holy shit. What, 3 years ago, there's no way I would have let anybody know that. No way. And so beginning to let people in and see that, no, I'm not always this person who's pushing, driving, moving, doing whatever, and always being the decision maker. Sometimes I am the person who says, okay, nope, you're the expert in that. You're going to make the decision on that. And I'm going to do whatever you tell me.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to be able to do that. Yeah. But it really took me understanding that about myself before I was able to let that go. So, well, Elisabeth, it has been so awesome having you on the show. I am so excited because I'm also inviting you. I would love for you to share this on my summit, which is happening in March, to be able to let even more people know how they can utilize this, how they can work with you to begin to understand and really take their business forward by understanding themselves in this way. So thank you so much for your time, Elisabeth. I really, truly appreciate it. And I know my listeners do as well.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Jenny.
Absolutely. And listener, you know how this goes. Stay tuned because there's another badass episode on the way.
Thanks for listening to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Why are you waiting to go to badassdirectsalesmastery.com? Don't make the dom get her whip. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with another rock star that you know in direct sales after you subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. You can also check out the show notes for links and any contact information mentioned in today's episode. We'll see you next time.